I'm Ben Gonzalez, and this is TDI. Well, do you know what a residential service contract is? These are sometimes sold or marketed as a home warranty, and they provide coverage for some of the things inside your home. So joining us today to discuss these residential service contracts is Elizabeth Salinas Strittmatter with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, Ben. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, let's start with the basics. So what is a residential service contract?
A residential service contract is simply a contract that protects certain components of your home. So by law, a residential service contract can cover large appliances in your home or certain systems like the electrical, the plumbing, the AC, and the heating. And these service contracts cover damage caused to these components of your home under specific circumstances. So a power surge, a defect in workmanship or materials, or even normal wear and tear. So say, for example, you bought a home and it came with the refrigerator, and you're a month into your home and all of a sudden that refrigerator goes out. If you have a residential service contract that covers the large appliances like a refrigerator, you'll be able to call that residential service contract company, say you need to make a claim. They'll send out a technician to come look at the refrigerator, decide whether it can be repaired or replaced, and then they'll fulfill the terms of the contract by paying out in an amount that's consistent with what the contract says. The really important thing for consumers to remember is that these residential service contracts are different from home warranties, and they are also different from insurance. So these cover specific components, and other forms of insurance may cover other things. So you really want to make sure that you're understanding the difference between a residential service contract and another type of service contract on your home. And you also want to make sure that you understand what exactly those service contracts cover, because they may not cover everything, and they may have different circumstances under which they will cover some things and will not cover other things.
So it's really about what's listed in that contract and understanding what you've purchased there.
Absolutely. The terms of the contract are very important, just like any other contract. And so when you're thinking about, will a residential service contract benefit me? Do I really need this? You will want to pay specific attention to those terms. Different companies offer different terms, and not all residential service contracts are the same.
Okay. Yeah, we've heard from consumers here at the Texas Department of Insurance who thought, I've got home insurance, so if an appliance breaks down, I'm covered. But that's not the way home insurance works. For home insurance, the key is the loss has to be part of a covered event, like a fire or a windstorm. So like you mentioned, the refrigerator goes out, but if it's destroyed during a fire, that might be covered by your home insurance because it's part of your fire claim. But if it goes out because of just normal wear or other things like a power surge, that might be because of a residential service contract would cover you, correct?
That's absolutely right. So with a residential service contract, by law, you're only looking at specific circumstances under which the coverage would kick in. So again, that's power surge, defect in workmanship or materials, and normal wear and tear. Now, but be careful, because there are also warranties from manufacturers on large appliances or air conditioners. So you want to understand how that coverage may overlap. You also want to understand the circumstances under which the warranty will kick in versus the residential service contract.
Okay, a lot to understand there and separate, because whatever the contract is, that's the only thing they're going to want to cover is part of that contract. So when can people buy one of these residential service contracts?
The most common time for a homeowner to purchase a residential service contract is when they purchase a home. That is where most people become familiar with these types of service contracts, and that's because oftentimes a seller may offer a residential service contract as an incentive for a buyer. If certain things are going to be conveyed in the home, like large appliances, that might be an incentive for a buyer to want to have some additional coverage for those large appliances should they go out within the first few years of them being in the home. However, you're not required to purchase a residential service contract in order to buy a home, and a seller's not required to offer one in order to sell a home. They're just sort of incentives that are done during the home buying process. The important thing also to remember about RSCs is you can get them at any point during your home ownership, whether you've been in your home for a month or you've been in your home for 25 years. So it just depends on when the homeowner feels like they might need a residential service contract, or if they start to think that, I'm going to need some extra coverage on some of the components in my home, maybe the plumbing systems or the electrical systems, or I want to make sure that I'm protecting my home against a power surge. They may decide that then is a good time to go ahead and purchase a residential service contract, but it can be done at any point during the home ownership. You will hear a lot of real estate agents talk about the benefits of a residential service contract, but the consumer always has a choice. You don't have to buy a residential service contract in order to purchase a home. You don't have to buy one that your real estate agent recommends, and you can decide what works best for you.
So you talked about some home builders and real estate agents. Can anybody sell these products?
Actually, no. It's very limited here in Texas. The only people that can sell residential service contracts have to be licensed providers or administrators. And let's talk about the difference between a provider and administrator. A provider is the company that you're directly contracting with to cover the costs of repair or replacement. They are the ones who own the company and have the financial backing for paying out on those contracts. An administrator is a third party that sells these contracts, and then they're responsible for basically being the go-between between the consumer and the actual provider, and they will help with the claims process. They will answer any questions that you might have about the residential service contract, and they are basically your go-to when you have any questions. But the provider also is responsible for answering questions that consumers may have. So the real only difference is you're either contracting directly with the provider of the residential service contract, or you're working with a third-party go-between.
Okay. And if I'm a consumer and I'm thinking about maybe buying one of these kind of service contracts, what are some of the things that I need to consider about those?
So I said earlier that the most important thing you need to do is consider this to be like any other contract that you would enter into. So the most important thing you need to do is read your contract and understand the terms. If you have questions, ask those questions before you purchase the contract. If the provider or the administrator isn't fully answering your questions, or you're not getting a good feeling about it, you may want to keep looking. You also want to check on the Better Business Bureau site. They're a great website for finding out about the reputation. So you want to do a little research. How satisfied are other consumers with the services that were provided by the provider or the administrator? Have they had problems trying to file claims? And if so, what are those problems? You want to make sure that you're dealing with a reputable company and that you're comfortable with that company. Another consideration for people is, are there additional fees if a technician comes out to your house to diagnose a problem? Are there any deductibles for repair or replacement in addition to the purchase cost of the residential service contract? Some residential service contracts may cover everything in the purchase price, and others may charge you a small technician fee when somebody comes out to your home. That brings me to another point. Many of these companies that offer these residential service contracts are not actually based in Texas, which is allowed under law. They don't have to be based here. They just have to be licensed here. So if a company is not licensed here, you want to ask that company, well, who would be coming out to my home to help me determine whether you're going to repair or replace it? What are some of the local companies that you work with? You want to do research into those local companies to make sure that they're dealing with reputable technicians and service people. You will also just want to make sure that the specific terms of the contract are spelled out very clearly. What is covered? What is not covered? What circumstances are there that repair will not, they just won't consider a repair? What circumstances are there where they will consider a repair? And most importantly, you just want to make sure that you know what systems in your home are covered and what appliances in your home are covered. And if you need some additional guidance on what questions you should ask yourself before you buy a residential service contract, TDLR has a comprehensive list on our website. You just go to tdlr.texas.gov. You click on our homepage. On our homepage, you will see a box that has specific information about a residential service contract. So you click on that, and that'll lead you to a host of other questions that you'll want to consider.
Does the TDLR site have a list of licensees?
You can actually check for licensure, yes, on the TDLR website as well. So what you would do is go to tdlr.texas.gov, and then you would click on licensees, and then that will lead you through a series of prompts where you can actually check for licensure.
Now, if somebody's having a problem with a residential service contract, is the website also where they'd go?
Yes. So we encourage people, if they believe that they are that the RSC provider administrator is not living up to the terms of the contract, we welcome people to file a complaint. That complaint will be taken through our intake process for review, and we will determine how to handle it from there. So we understand, though, that not everybody is comfortable going to our website and putting in a complaint. You may want to talk to an actual person. So if you prefer to talk to someone at TDLR, you can call us at 1-800-803-9202.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Elizabeth. I think I understand a little bit more about residential service contracts now.
I hope so, and I hope your viewers enjoyed watching this, and TDLR is here to assist customers and consumers always.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, one other difference to remember between home insurance versus a service contract is if you've got a home loan, your lender is probably going to require you to get some home insurance to protect that investment, but a service contract is optional, so it's always up to you. And if you want to learn more about home insurance and what it covers, you can visit our website. It's tdi.texas.gov. And if you've got an insurance question, you can call us on our helpline at 800-252-3439. So for Elizabeth Salinas Strittmatter, I'm Ben Gonzalez, and this is TDI.